Hey everyone, Sean Maloney, Digital Business Masters. Another update. Every week we do these calls from the DBM Academy team. It's all about making sure that we keep doing what we can do to give back, given that this technology has those who understand it and are able to run properly with it and manage it properly, do very, very well. So it's a case of making sure that we help as many other people learn how to do very, very well. And obviously that starts with information. And then it goes into education, and then it goes into application. So part two of this call is all about how to apply that knowledge. Once you've got the right mindset, the right skills, and you've allocated into the system management of what it takes and asset management, and you've learned how to do that rather than waiting for other people to do it for you, then you'll be in a position to be successful. That's where the income comes from. And then finally, you're into wealth management. Okay, so the first part of this call is all about providing up-to-the-minute information with regards to why we are successful and how we stay successful. And one of the ways we do that, a new statistic that's just come out this week, is owning 0.26 Bitcoin. 0.26 puts you in the top 1% of all owners of Bitcoin on the planet. So you can judge where you're up to with that. I've said for years and years and years, own 1 Bitcoin, own 1 kilogram of gold. There's a reason we've said that for most of the last decade. And it's a case now of making sure you understand where you're at with that process, as well as obviously managing your ongoing need for cash flow. So we're not here to give any advice, certainly not financial advice, when it comes to the vagaries and skills involved with balancing your assets against cash flow. But we are here to show you a blueprint on which we've done it. And your job is to follow that process or not. We get lots of people, obviously, who want the process, will start the process, but for some reason they don't continue the process. But go figure. It's a bit like that in the gym between January and March. Why are we so confident and aware? Well, because if anybody has spent any time either running their own business or learning and reading how other people run businesses, then you'll know that business owners and the wealthy, they don't convert devaluing fiat currency that they're working hard for every day, mining fiat on a treadmill. They don't just convert that directly to buy liabilities. If you've been doing that and still are doing that in your life, that's why you're not getting ahead. It is actually that simple at its base point. What business owners do, we obviously put time, effort, and energy into creating value as best we can for a marketplace, for consumers, for people who require and relish the value we provide. But we convert that devaluing fiat into accretive assets. And on top of that, we then turn that accretion, that equity, into cash flowing methods. Now that isn't easy, especially in this space over this past decade, because you have to try different things because we're in a new realm, we're in a new world. But the premise of what you do as a business owner to recollateralize equity on your balance sheet, to convert cash flows, to fund liabilities, that'll never change. And the question you've got to ask yourself is, do you understand that premise? And then do you understand the sound money premise on which you have an inevitable growth in equity as they print more fiat currency? And that's been going on most of your life. All your life if you were born after 1971. So what we've done at DBM is quite simple. We observed this phenomenon back in 2008. We saw the problem. We got affected by the problem. And then we determined that we would try our best to solve the problem for ourselves. We'd no longer be involved with bosses, banks, and governments as the foundation of our future. We knew that simply running successful business wasn't actually good enough for the average person, right? If you're able to cash flow a business that more than outpaces inflation, of course, you're going to be fine. But how much better could you have done if you would have converted proportions of your energy over that time into accretive assets such as Bitcoin? Now, companies, even companies, let alone individuals, Companies are just starting to understand this now. And that's why you're starting to get what are called Bitcoin treasury companies. And they're spearheading the concept of putting accretive assets that are globally connected on one system balance sheet. Yeah, it's no longer the case that you run a business in isolation in one part of a country or even in a country and then hope to do your best to build that balance sheet based on what that does in a limited geographical area. No, those days are gone. Any business owner now, and should have been doing this for a while, is able to connect themselves to a globally connected interface. And as other companies do the same, then that creates the accretion. And that is a much more valuable part of your balance sheet than simply working in an isolated geography. Now, of course, we appreciate that a lot of companies, let alone individuals, will sit and observe, and they have done for well over a decade. And I can't really blame them. I don't think anybody can. But as we go into this next era, you're now in an era whereby this should be an absolute prerequisite for any serious business owner, let alone individual. Business owners obviously have a much bigger access to capital flow. Yeah, they can do much bigger things. That's why it's a good idea to run a business. That's what DBM is. But the whole idea as an individual is the same. Reallocate proportions of your devaluing fiat mining activity across to accretive sound money. And just let that build. It's called dollar cost averaging. And the vast majority of the OGs inside DBM, for example, those who've been with us for a long time, have been doing that now for many, many, many years. And are now on the front foot as we start to create ongoing equity, increasing equity, average 68% CAGR over the past 14 years. We're budgeting on maybe 30% over this next 10 years. And that's okay. I don't think that's ambitious. I think that's sensible. But we don't stop there at DBM. We obviously understand that you can't run a balance sheet, you can't run a business, not a successful business anyway, entirely off a balance sheet, obviously. You've got to fund, right, the growth of your assets, and you do that by increasing liabilities, and you balance the sheet. You pay yourself off a director's loan account, and you're able then to run your life off your business. But in order to get to that point, you obviously need to cash flow. So you need to allocate proportions of your time and effort and asset base and equity to cash flowing entities. So in part 2 of this call, we talk about what we've done over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years in order to put ourselves in a position whereby we own startups, and we're fintech investors basically, where we're looking to put ourselves on the front foot in a range of different industries, from solar panels to sport to entertainment to gaming to trading and finance, etc. Right? That's the bedrock of your machinery on which you're able to build a factory that will kick in the necessary cash flows that your company requires. Now, does that happen overnight? No. Does it happen in a straight line? Is everything easy? Is it a lottery ticket? No. You have to work on it. You have to nurture it. You have to build it. That's where you get the yields from. This is holistically called DeFi, or decentralized finance. Okay, so you attach these two right-hand business models to the left-hand business model, the balance sheet, right? And then if you're really good, and you do have to be really good, initially we've looked at this and thought, oh, this is quite straightforward. We find a founder and a group of exec people that are better than we are at running business. We study their idea. We realize that it has relevance. We place investment into what they're trying to do in the form of coin acquisition, ICO. And we then manage in that process to engage the tokenomics necessary to help those companies become what they want to become. And we've done that dozens and dozens of times at DBM, right? Sometimes successful, sometimes not, sometimes sat in the middle, where we do have to help the company move along. So again, in part 2, you'll hear us talk about many projects that we're still managing through that process, because we know that's how business works. Yeah. So altcoins are special because they're not just about separated equity or yield in isolation, as you do with, say, Bitcoin. Altcoins, if you do them correctly, do have the ability to create equity plus yield in one ecosystem, often on much lower market capitalizations and much lower cost of entries, but much more volatile because often they're putting the track down in front of the train. So you have to be resilient enough and mindful enough to be able to live with that. And that's what we'd spend a lot of time doing at DBM Academy side, is supporting people through that process. Yeah. And then eventually you get what I call liquidity events. And then your job is then to harvest that liquidity event and convert that back to the bolstering of your balance sheet so that you can repeat the process again. That is basically the business model that we have at DBM. Now, we know that's a lot to take on board, and we appreciate this isn't for everybody. We do liken it to a digital gym. Yeah, if you've ever been to the gym in your life, obviously most of us have, you'll recognize that everybody wants to get fit, everybody wants to build muscle, everybody wants to get cut, right? But very few people do. They play at it, right? Frankly, they can't be bothered, or they haven't got the confidence or the intelligence, or they feel unworthy. Now, in our experience, everybody's worthy, everybody's got the intelligence, and everybody's got the capability. So what's left? Obviously, resilience, fortitude, and all those soft skills. So the idea is that we identified that many years ago. We're now over 5 years old as an academy, so we must be doing something right. But at the end of the day, it's all about starting at the mindset. If you're still struggling with mindset and you've got this victim mentality, if everybody should have solved it for me by now, it's his fault, their fault, everybody else's fault, well, you may want to look at that, because at the end of the day, there's only one person the buck stops with. But get your mindset sorted out. A lot of the mindset stuff gets resolved when you get the skills. So the thing about skills is that it's not just about the ability to go and do what you need to do. It's the confidence it gives you to do it. And what I've found and what we've found as a team, and we've known this forever, bringing, apprentices through normal business and middle managers and finding sales staff and organizing suppliers, it's always the case that people just won't put that extra effort in. The money's in the last 10 yards. The money's in the final 10%. That's where success is. Your job is to break into that realm and stay there. And it's a sad indictment, but I'm afraid that's the way it is. And we know it's that way because look at general society. Yeah, they're always looking for handouts. They're looking for the next thing to be given to them by bosses, banks, and governments. It's everybody else's fault, right? You've got to get out there. It's tough love, but you've got to get out there and make a difference, especially in this space. You've got to be self-reliant, self-sovereign. And once you've got those two things under your belt, you can start to move more confidently and competently, not just in managing what you've already got involved with, but also making sure that you make better and better and better and better decisions as the world evolves. And that's the clever bit, because the world is evolving, and it's evolving very quickly. Now, to help that process along, we're using AI technologies these days to make cost of entry much lower. Yeah, with our digital coaching team. Yeah, obviously, human coaches are expensive. Digital coaches, relatively not so, but not as effective. Whatever they tell you about AI, the human coaches at DBM for sure are never going to be replaced by AI. You need that human touch, right? But what we can do is distill the steps, and we've devised this into 12 steps because it fits a year. And we go through every single step. Even if you've been at this for quite a while, you can reconnect with yourself back where you would have done something better in the past. That's what this Wealth Builder series is about. And you can go through it as many times as you want once you're plugged in. Yeah, no problem at all with that. And then we'll sit you down once a month and make you accountable, which is the other thing that's important for success. Be accountable, especially in a space whereby you're sat on your own most of the time in the comfort of your own laptop. All right, so given that there is a business plan, given that there is a model, given that it's been proven, given that there's many, many ways to skin the cat here, right? All I can say is, as I've said earlier, move with what's happening. The world is turning, right? In fact, they call it the fourth turning, right? The whole idea is we're working now in a multipolar world. The whole idea is that inevitably whatever age you are right now, you are being affected by technology. The question is, are you going to stop being affected by it? And are you going to start being improved by it? We've known this a long time in general business, setting up some of the very early e-commerce companies back in the early 2000s, extending gross margins because we totally understood the ability to take out distribution and retail companies and go direct to market, right? That puts huge value on your gross margins as a manufacturer, especially. As I say, back in 2008, we also recognized that, that's all well and good. The cash flow is great, but what's bolstering this balance sheet? Well, most of that, of course, was hinged on the success and ultimately failure, which is how it's turned out, of the fiat banking system. So again, you can all look back and go, well, 15 years ago, if I'd have known then what I know today, right? But now we do know it. The second best decisions I made today. And that's very much what's happening with institutions and corporations and governments and regulators. Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time over the past 10, 15 years back here as pioneers, recognizing there is something in this concept whereby you want accretive assets, you want sound money. Yeah. You want an ability to own something that's untouchable. And that's always been like a bit of a feel. But those with enough conviction have obviously determined that you're going to dollar cost average all the way through these cycles. And then all of a sudden, post-COVID, and certainly over this past 2 years, something seismically shifted. And then in 2025, it completely fractured. There's been a complete dislocation from old world thinking to now where we are. That's how quick this happens. So if you've been building behind this, okay, even with all these headwinds back here, kudos to you, because you're now very much involved with what's called a wealth transfer, especially if you own more than 0.1 Bitcoin. Even if you're just starting out today, it is absolutely not too late. In fact, it's incredibly early. The only thing you've got to do is focus on spending at least 1,000 hours understanding what you're doing. If you want to be an expert, by the way, it's 10,000 hours. So that's just a process of time. The question is, have you got the conviction and determination to do it? So we know we're across this Rubicon. We know where we are now as we go into 2026. We've had 3 or 4, whatever it is, all-time highs in Bitcoin, right? Just this cycle. And we're just about to go into more. And we know that because of all the stuff I'll talk about now, which is the backbone of the conviction so that you can leave this call every week with a week's worth at least of energy and awareness and insight that you're simply not getting from mainstream media or bosses or teachers or banks or institutions or financial advisors. Where are they? Well, we know where they are. They're still stuck in the legacy system, working their wages off hegemony. How's that done for you for the past 40, 50 years? If you want the change, go and create it. You can't predict the future, but you can make the future, right? So just be aware, this next 10 years is even more profound than the last 10 years, no matter where you're starting from, because 99% of Bitcoin will have been mined in its entirety by 2036. The final Bitcoin won't get mined until we're pushing daisies up, right? 100 odd years from now. Explaining this to my 12-year-old this week, right? But 99%, on top of what's coming with AI, on top of what's coming with regulation and legislation around how we can operate decentralized finance as grown adults, as individuals, without myriads of middlemen, telling us what we can and can't do, and trying to put us under the cosh with usury and fractional reserve lending, and making people believe that they're going to solve the problem. Wait till I give you some information about what's going on with a government level right now, as we touch that slide in the next few minutes. First of all, let's just have a look at some of the macro stuff. I keep trying to get the macro page to one page, and I can't. Right? A year ago, I could. Now I can't. I can't get the macro updates off 2 pages. So I'll go through them as succinctly and eloquently as I possibly can. But it's a lot of information, right? And it's why we record this. It's why it's out there on the channels. And obviously what you do is you take this information and then you bring that back into the academy to go into more deep conversations, the coaches' cafes, the workspaces, or the workshops. So you work with people of a like mind who understand what they're doing, right? Get yourself engaged, because a lot of this stuff is very high level and it will throw you in a spin. But when you get it to the level we get it, because remember, we do this full time, so we're studying this all the time, then that level of understanding is that 1,000 hours, is that 10,000 hours, right? So it's very interesting. So Kraken, great project, a platform, Kraken. We've used it for many, many years. Very much encourage people to work with Kraken. So it allows now crypto collateral for derivatives, okay, trading across the EU. Now you'll find in the macro section lots of updates on one hand with regards to geographical developments, and then the contrary when you look at what the actual ECB or the European Parliament's executives doing. It's very, very confusing. But the reason macro is powerful is because if you study history, certainly it's back to the Industrial Revolution, you'll know that the industrialists, right, the true capitalists, not the neo guys, the true capitalists, these are the guys who have always created the changes, right? So all you have to do actually is watch best practice in business, as opposed to being confused by mass media and government. And what Kraken are doing there is a great example of that. So expanding access for institutional and retail traders, right? That's a very, very important thing. On the more high-level macro, SOFR, which took over from LIBOR back in 2018. Again, if you don't understand what SOFR or LIBOR is, then go and do your homework. Get yourself informed, right? Plummeted late last week, right? What does that mean? Well, that's the rate the big players borrow cash overnight, right? And it's dropped significantly, as we said it would, as they experiment with what the FOMC meeting last week was talking about with regards to where they were trying to smoke and mirror people into what they're doing to control and stay in control. This is the Fed I'm talking about. And then within a day, right, they printed billions into the system. As a direct result of that, you get these shifts in the overnight lending rates, okay? So it's not a big a deal as it used to be, I don't think, because generally what happened when this type of shift took place is you saw immediate effects in Bitcoin. It's not happening as quickly these days because obviously you've got much more absorption going on with Bitcoin into the institutional levels, which is a good thing, right? Because we've lived, as you saw on the previous chart, we've lived with a decade of severe volatility. And now we're looking forward to eras into the future of much more stable position. But all these points will just lead you at the end of this call to understand that there's more and more foundational gravity happening behind the asset class of Bitcoin that inevitably lead to price discovery, right? Which is one of the main measures of what we measure success on, obviously. And why you can walk away, hopefully, from a call like this, not being so affected by people who are determined just to throw FUD around, and create bear markets just because they think they're clever traders, right? These people just need to go. We're way past that era now. We're into proper business. Billionaire BitMEX founder Arthur Hayes. Again, I'd encourage you to follow this guy. So Bitcoin will keep going higher through to 2028 as more and more nations keep printing money globally. It goes back to what we've said forever. He's calling for $1 million Bitcoin. Might be a little bit ambitious, but that's what he's talking about. And this is what we're tracked on now. We're tracked towards 2030 for that type of level, right? It's very difficult not to see that happening when you dig down into the detail and do the basic mathematics. So to hear people like him talking about a condensed version of that just adds more fuel to our cause. Strategy announces STRE. Now, this is important, okay? So if you're not studying yet what's going on with TradFi, as I've said now for most of this year, and adding TradFi along with DeFi to your portfolio, just as we've done with projects deep into the DeFi space. And it's been a journey of discovery. It's been a real challenge, but we know what's required and we know why it's needed. It's all about cash flows, and Strategy have brought this to the fore very much. And now I'm pleased to say it's available in Europe as well, so that we can go after those yields that we want, right? I spoke before about having Bitcoin on its own with equity, but we want yields, right? So to create Bitcoin-based yields is a very good thing. So make sure you understand what that is and put yourself in position accordingly, especially if you're looking forward to liquidity events over coming weeks and months, because you want to put yourself on the front foot with what you've built over the past 5-10 years, right? Thailand just approved 0% capital gains for Bitcoin and crypto trades. We'll see if that fully gets approved, but it's just a sign of the times. Again, as I say, lots and lots of countries, as you'll see in the geopolitical section, are positioning themselves to make sure they take advantage, especially through what are called stable coins. $13 trillion BlackRock have announced they will launch a Bitcoin ETF in Australia. Okay, sleepy Australia. It's almost the same as Europe, Australia. It's sort of a little bit slow in what it's trying to do there. And I don't know why, because it's 28 million people, but it needs to get moving, just as Europe does. It sounds like, again, the industrialists, whenever you make a BlackRock, it's a different conversation. But the industrialists are obviously leading the charge, and the governments will just follow along like lapdogs, right? Because they know they've no choice. Standard Chartered to launch a full Bitcoin custody services to commence in January. Now, we didn't see that one coming. So that's a very, very important thing. You'll hear more about, the insurance companies, the big institutionals, the pension funds, all these companies starting now to offer custodian services directly on Bitcoin. And that is just going to build, it has actually already built a huge amount of liquidity underneath the system that obviously is currently in a juxtaposition between the OGs and early players in the retail side coming out of Bitcoin, where other institutions and people are coming in, because the retail guys are getting older now, right? The OGs are getting older. They want to live their lives. Fair play. Strike now offers Bitcoin-backed business loans globally, and I'm pleased to say that is now available in the UK as well. Okay, so if you do run a business, then have a look at Strike. Or if you don't run a business, have a look at Strike, because Strike do also provide these types of facilities to individuals as well, just like we've done for many, many years with other platforms. Very, very successfully since 2018. JP Morgan holds just over 5.2 million Bitcoin now via ETFs. Right, good old JP Morgan, along with Bank of America, etc. Jamie Dimon, don't own Bitcoin. If any of my staff are found owning Bitcoin, I'm going to fire them. What an idiot, And now he's come through right through the other way as if it's like water over duck's back with these people, and the belligerence is beyond comprehension. But that's how they've got to where they are, right? Arrogance. So the whole idea is don't do what the rich say, do what they do, because behind the scenes he was stacking Bitcoin. So watch people like him. Metaplanet, okay, just acquired a 100 million loan to get more purchase in Bitcoin. Now their stock price into their MNAV went from 8x as the early investors got in earlier this year down to 1x MNAV. Now, again, you've seen the memes with the doors, right? Where people are in the queues for desks, $100,000 Bitcoin, everybody's queuing up, right? $50,000 Bitcoin, nobody's at the queue. It's exactly the same type of thing with that. But what I would say about these treasury companies is go steady. What we've suggested for the past, most of this last year, is work with strategy. Work with the biggest in the business, right? Let everything get organized. And then we're not going to get, pulled into all these things. And the TradFi level, we've done enough of that in DeFi. We're much more sophisticated than that now. We don't need to be chasing things around. So just be careful. But at the same time, recognize that people FOMO in TradFi just like they do in DeFi. Right? So 8x to 1x doesn't sound great, but that's not the point. Because as they bring more Bitcoin onto their books, that's only going to go one way on the accretion that we understand. Right? Just like we're running with our own private treasury companies in our own way. Second page of macro. Again, Arthur Hayes busy as ever, talking last week in a lot of detail. Said the Fed will soon start to quietly print money. Yeah, you're not kidding. That's already started, actually. So again, the money printer goes brr, and we know what that means. We've experienced this now 4 times. 4 times since 2008, right? And repeating again. It's repeating all over again because they've got these big levers now, like there's some clever geniuses around what's called QE and QT, right? Most people don't understand that, and most people just write it off to say, well, it's inflation, it's shrinkflation, everything's just going up in price. No. Make it your business to understand that whatever you're paying for right now in 2025, your target should be to have that costing you in price terms the same as it cost you in 2020. And then go and bamboozle your friends and your brother-in-laws about you're able to say that, right? And you should know what those numbers are. If you've been accumulating an accretive asset like Bitcoin for more than 5 years. You should know that. We did a blog on this, actually. Jump over to the blog, the blog and the podcast, actually, over at the Academy. And I was talking about how inflation does one thing, but it's also about the lottery ticket mentality on the other. An individual just putting away I put it into pounds as it happened, £20 a week over a year, over 2025, should now own about 0.013 Bitcoin, I think it was. Right? What's not to get about that? What's stopping people? Well, I think you know the answer to that yourself. But at the end of the day, it's a massive misunderstanding in terms of what they appreciate with regards to hidden inflation through monetary printing, currency printing, and an even bigger total misunderstanding about what it is to own sound money. Right? Toga in the soup. It needs to be fixed. Get out there and make a difference if you so choose. Bitcoin Treasury Firm Future, backed by Adam Back. Another 35 million raised to put in some more Bitcoin. Okay, just small little soft signals about everything going on. Safety and Amus, if you've not read the Bitcoin Standard, the book, why not? Get it read and pass it around your family. In fact, buy your family for Christmas, right? The whole idea is that book in one fell read will tell you everything you need to know about stopping playing the lottery and starting to build accretive assets. He said, when they were talking about the problems, as I'm just talking about now, with devaluing fiat, that's what Bitcoin fixes. If we go back to having hard money, where money is no longer debt, we no longer need to be monetizing debt, right? What's not to get about that? We no longer need everybody to become a debt slave. This is the fundamental problem. It's maybe not as simple as fix the money, fix the world, but it's not far off. So why don't people, with all the tools and resources and education and information and AI and even Bitcoin itself for people to attach themselves to, why is the problem not being fixed from the bottom up? What's wrong with people? I think we know the answer to that. But all we can do is get out there and do what I'm doing today to the best of my ability. Charles Schwab to launch crypto trading. 7 trillion giant Charles Schwab plans to launch crypto trading in the first half of 2026. We did see that one coming, but it's nice to have it confirmed. Confused and conflicted Bank of England. God bless the Bank of England. What are we going to do with these people? They need to retire, just like the ECB does. But confused and conflicted Bank of England pledges to roll out stablecoin rules just as quickly as the US. Well done, Sherlock. Amid concerns it's falling behind. Yeah, okay. And then, so that was last week. That was around Wednesday last week. They made this glorious announcement. And then just overnight, over this weekend, then is proposing to put a $20,000 equivalent in pounds stablecoin limit on individuals. Where do these people get off? It's exactly the same as what's going on in Europe with the ECB, by the way. They want their cake and eat it. In fact, they are stone scared of what's going on with regards to the abilities now that people have, and have had for some time, I might add, to use stablecoins attached to the world's largest and strongest economies. Okay? Now we'll get into more detail in the future about why it's not going to be sweetness and roses getting involved with stablecoins. We've known that for a long time. But the fact that the Bank of England themselves don't have enough skill and capability and awareness in their board to stop being so conflicted tells you everything you need to know about headless chickens. And it's exactly the same with the ECB, by the way. You're not finding this in China. You're not finding this in Southeast Asia. You're certainly not finding it in the US. So what is wrong with the Europeans? Credit card giant MasterCard partnering with Ripple, Gemini, and WebBank to pilot RL USD. This is all to do with Ripple now. The Ripple army are over the moon, as usual. Stablecoin settlements for credit cards, transactions, and the XAP ledger. Fantastic. Go for it, Ripple. Right? Go for it. We have a relatively, sanguine state of opinion around the altcoin markets. We've always said on the top 10, Ripple is one of them. Good luck to them, okay? But they don't have a habit of getting overexcited. So we'll just see where we go. We'll see where we go with that, but it's always worth mentioning where Ripple are up to because it's great. It's a great project, but JP Morgan says Bitcoin, significant upside, looks more attractive than gold after major deleveraging. Now, we'll get into more of that deleveraging now, because this is now starting to throw through, and it all comes through the politics. So I know there's a lot of information here, guys, but it all has to be put out there so that you can work on this in your own time, hopefully from the foundation that this call provides every week. Right. So we'll start in Southeast Asia and we'll work around through the Indian subcontinent. We'll get across the United States, then we'll end up back in Europe, okay? Hong Kong, to ease restrictions on Bitcoin and crypto trading, China bending the knee, which is absolutely happening through Hong Kong. It does this a lot, right? We know about this. We've known about this for a while. Obviously, that's unlocking billions and billions of dollars of liquidity, yeah? Thailand officially implements, as I said before, zero crypto capital gains, which is a great thing. Okay, they're obviously trying to become a magnet, like Dubai and other places such, to bring, foreign funds into their country and foreign people. South Korea, wealthy foreign people, I might add. South Korea's second largest political party urges governments to legalize Bitcoin ETFs as soon as possible. Okay, so South Korea, not stupid over there. They know what they're doing. They'll catch it up quick enough, as they have done in Kazakhstan. Just said they're considering selling their gold reserves. Now, we'll get into this more detail as this goes on, but I think you're going to find this, that not necessarily selling gold reserves, but certainly revaluing them, right? This is what we're talking about with this shift that we're finding taking place, and it's going to move quicker than we think, which is going to be quite something to behold, especially if you own gold and Bitcoin. As we've said forever, own 1 kilogram of gold, own 1 Bitcoin. Pakistan is weighing the rupee-backed stablecoin as banking leaders, weighing up, that means leaders warn the country could lose up to 25 billion in opportunities without a quick digital asset regulations. Again, well done, Sherlock. Yeah. So all countries, because of what's gone on since November 2024, are now realizing that they need to be on this train. This is why I get so agitated with the likes of the Bank of England or the ECB. They're trying to have the cake and eat it, right? They're trying to stay hegemonic without fully understanding what it is that's going on around them, right? It's crazy, but this is the way it is. As an individual, you're well out of it, by the way. If you own Bitcoin, you're well out of this. But the whole idea is we have to live where we live. India's High Court just gave crypto legal status, which is a big deal for India, because for many, many years, they were fighting and kicking and screaming against things, mainly because of the IMF. So they've got a lot to answer for, right? But the IMF now is becoming such a backseat. In fact, the chair of the IMF just a couple of weeks ago was suggesting that people need to move on to the stable coin train. So we'll see what happens with the IMF, but they've been nothing more than bullies for the past 5 decades. So the India's High Court ruled that Bitcoin and other crypto are forms of property that can be owned, held in trust, and protected under law. Again, well done, Sherlock. White House. Now, across to the states. Obviously, the states are spearheading all this, right? And if not spearheading it, they are the most vocal about it. The BRICS nations understand it. Obviously, they've been doing this for some time. China understands it, obviously. Yeah, they've been doing this for some time. Parts of Southeast Asia have. But for whatever reason, if the US decides something, it makes it much more vocal. And that's all that's been happening, right? And they're going around the world doing what they're doing, right? So the whole idea here is that we're looking for this market structure bill, okay? It is mathematically obvious that once you convert a lot of the fixed income markets across to these technologies, which is part of what they need to do in order to correct and, frankly, save the US economy, that you're looking at a $20 trillion crypto industry, right? Of which Bitcoin is 60% of that, broadly speaking, right? So you can work the numbers out for yourselves. Senate crypto bill expected in December. Now, obviously, with all this ridiculous government shutdown ridiculousness, which is apparently going to get sorted out this week, but we'll see. Short-term bullish for Bitcoin again. They're going to bring through this bill, hopefully, in December. So we could go with a flurry towards the end of 2025. And I don't think they've got any choice, because they are going to have to move into gear before, this is America I'm talking about, before the midterms, right? And then you've got this standoff going on between the left and the right, not just in America, but across the world, even though it's more profoundly obvious in America, which is great to see and observe, because you've got this interesting standoff. So the way I've framed this in my mind, and hopefully it's useful to you, on the right hand side, right, on the red with US Republicans, you've got Trump's stimmy checks. Very like we've been reporting on this for some time, but it's looking like now they're going to bring these stimmy checks in either directly or through taxation, right? Taxation relaxation. So they're stimmy checks from the right wing, if you want to call it that, right? And you've also got these 50-year mortgages just been announced, right? So think about that. And then look at the left wing guys, this Mandami character. He's going straight to the handouts, which is equivalent to a stimmy check, and rent controls, which is an equivalent to 50-year mortgages. So both parties are doing exactly the same thing. When you work at the level we work at, in other words, we're close as we can be to the centre of the money supply, both those political alignments are mainly there to win votes, don't actually mean anything because they both demand that more fiat currency has to be printed. Right? So, you can have your allegiances, you can have your beliefs, you can have your tribal awarenesses of left, right wing politics. But as we've seen most of all our lives, especially if you're born after 71, it's the same thing. Right? And it's the industrial complex and the military complex that have governed most of our lives. And now you're in the financial industrial complex. That's what shifted. And to observe that as a sound money owner is just like having your arms folded and having a privilege. Now, you can't sit back and say everything's sorted and sweet this and like, but the more and more and more and more sound money you own, the more you're able to sit back and observe on a globally interconnected balance sheet that is being directly influenced, not just by the incessant printing of fiat currency, but also the fact that, to the last point there, with regards to the way that they're looking to revalue and the building case for using sovereign gold and Bitcoin allocation to rebalance the entire balance sheet of the United States of America. Now, if it's going to be done over there, you can bet your bottom dollar every other nation will do the same. Right? So you've got to go away now and study what would that mean to a kilogram of gold? Price-wise, what would that mean to 1 Bitcoin or 0.1 Bitcoin or 0.23 Bitcoin? What would it mean? The maths are pretty obvious if you understand the differences that these countries have with regards to their deficits. Yeah? So make that one of your targets for this week. Go and figure that out, right? And it's just a way to maintain not just a blind bullishness in hopeful price discovery, but a fundamental understanding of what's going on behind the scenes in order for you to get what you want as an individual so you can go out there and help other individuals, starting with your family. Why don't your family and friends own a little piece of gold and Bitcoin? Why not? You know why. But how can we help people? How do we do it? And then, contrary to all that, last but not least, the grandmas and granddads in the European Union, the Europeans now are going full surveillance mode. Cash payments over 3,000 will require mandatory identity checks. They're not messing around now, right? They're worse than the Bank of England. They want their cake and keep their cake, right? Cash movements over 10,000 euro is banned entirely under the new EU AML rules, okay? I don't think it'll get this far, actually, but these are the headlines. Fiat is becoming a permission system. Will this stick in a multipolar world? I don't think so. I do not think so. I just think the belligerence and arrogance and complicity of what goes on, especially in the European Union, is beyond the pale. And why the Europeans are putting up with it, I do not know. But they're all just lethargically letting these things wash over them because the Europeans know what they did. They brought in huge amounts of Southern European economics into Germany and France have been basically dismantled, right? But they've still got the vote base. So the Europeans are going to have to figure this out, right? But hopefully the best we can hope for, the best you can hope for if you're based in Europe, is you get rid of these grandmas. They've got to go, right? They've got to go because they're just going to get washed over anyway. right? Based on everything we can see here. So I know that's deep politics, guys, but it's necessary. If you want to be close to the money supply, you better understand it. So wrap it up. I know that's a lot of info, as I say every week, a lot to take on, okay? But that's why we have the Academy. We're working every day in workspaces and workshops and coffee mornings, whatever you want to call them, talking about different things like this that allow people to stay one step ahead and stay ahead, right? If you're still trying to get there and you're still licking your wounds because this has happened and nothing's changed in my life and I'm not getting things as quick as I want, have a look at yourself. You need to make sure that you get your mindset organized, right? And then work through the hard yards it takes to get to this level of conviction. Not based on chasing riches and wealth, based on the fact that you want to make a difference. And once you're there, it's a pleasurable experience. Okay, we'll be here either way. Best of luck with it all. We'll see you on the next call.